One of the very first videos I ever made that focused on discussing and dissecting champions in League, beyond just rewriting their bios, was centered around Elise. This was before I even really started Let's Talk About as a thing, and the video in question was much shorter than my usual character essays. In fact, the video was so short that I could just play it to you now as my thesis statement. Should Elise really be a Shadow Isles champion? This is something that I've been thinking about for a while now. Elise's ties to the Shadow Isles have always felt kind of arbitrary. She's not undead, she has no affiliation to the Ruined King at all, and the deity that she serves, Vilemaw, appears completely disconnected from the Ruination. Frankly, we still don't even know exactly what Vilemaw is. It's called the Spider God, but in a world like Runeterra where we have celestial gods, spirit gods, god warriors, and whatever Nagakiboros is, that really doesn't clarify much. I mean, even Legends of Runeterra seems to be implying that Vilemaw isn't at all bound or tied to the Black Mist, as its card art shows it attacking a wagon somewhere that clearly isn't the Shadow Isles. I don't know where this is exactly, but the fact that there's greenery and a blue sky means that this can't be the Twisted Tree line, right? Maybe it's on the Blessed Isles before they were consumed by the Black Mist, but really, why is there a giant carnivorous spider god hiding out underneath those isles to begin with? Doesn't seem very blessed. The only thing that really seems to connect Elise and Vilemaw to souls in the Shadow Isles at this point is the Soul Spinner. And frankly, we know and understand even less about this guy than we do about the so-called Spider God. All we can say for sure is that he's got some connection to the Kindred and, by extension, the other mass spirits. But everything beyond that is kind of up in the air. I mean, I'm pretty sure that he's in Elise's basement in the card art, so it's not like he has any real ties to the Isles either, as far as we can tell. Beyond all of that, Elise's current bio states that she only went to the Shadow Isles to get Mordekaiser's skull for the Black Rose. But the part about his bones being necessary to resurrect him was removed from Mordekaiser's bio, so whoops. In conclusion, I do believe that Elise would be better off if she were officially designated a Noxian champion and her bio were rewritten to say that she got her powers in Noxus rather than the Shadow Isles. As far as I can find, this really wouldn't affect or contradict anything in the lore at all, and the only issue would be Elise's alignment to the Shadow Isles in Legends of Runeterra. Still, I'm sure you could find a way to justify it. Maybe you could say that she went to the Shadow Isles at some point to accomplish something, like how Ziggs was thrown into Shurima or Malphite into Targon because that's where their stories have put them, even if those aren't their regions of origin. Regardless, I do think that making Elise's spider cult, and Vilemaw to that extent, creatures purely based in Noxus rather than the Shadow Isles would benefit everything in the long run. So, yeah, I think the point is pretty clear. That said, now that it's been a couple years since that original upload, well, I do still agree with my original assessment, but I think I could now stand to do a more thorough breakdown of the champion. Really dig into the minutiae of what her character does right and wrong, as well as why she currently is the way she is. So, let's walk into the spider's web together and take a closer look at its queen. Elise was released on October 26, 2012, although she technically began her existence as someone else entirely. The concept of the Spider Queen was originally intended for a cancelled champion named Priscilla, who was originally envisioned as a proper spider-human hybrid. Riot would later revamp this concept by fan demand into a champion who could switch between spider and human forms at will. Thus, we got the first iteration of the champion we now know as Elise. Elise's first bio doesn't actually tell us much about her backstory, but it does tell us her general deal. She led a cult that worshipped some so-called spider god in some undisclosed dark holes. The bio details how she took some of her most faithful followers on a pilgrimage across the sea to the Shadow Isles, and led them to a cave that served as the lair for an undead spider beast. So yes, despite what I've said before, it turns out Vilemaw is, or at least at one time was meant to be, undead like the rest of the isle's inhabitants. After the beast ate its fill, it allowed Elise to extract its venom, which she consumed to maintain her youthful vigor and spider-like powers. Okay, so pretty straightforward. Elise fools people into worshipping a false deity, takes them to be eaten, and in exchange gets power and eternal youth. Honestly speaking, I think Elise is probably one of the better femme fatale characters League ever got, even if her real lure is more so this so-called faith than her beauty. When Elise launched, her login screen came with a bit of a surprise. A fully voiced narration from none other than her VA, Sydney Rainon Smith, detailing how Elise first established this relationship with Vilemaw. Unfortunately, the text for this narration has not been recorded anywhere that I can find, but you can listen to the full thing thanks to Reign of Gaming uploading the full audio right here on YouTube. The TLDR of the story is this. Elise went to visit the mythical Shadow Isles, for some reason, and found herself both horrified and fascinated with the land of the undead. There she stumbled upon the spider's lair alongside her unnamed companion, and devoted herself to guiding people to a better place. It's very vague, to be sure, and raises several questions. Still, the narration is expertly done, and gives us the general idea that Elise might have some genuine ideology behind her actions, beyond just wanting to stay young and beautiful forever. Elise's second bio, though, was a single paragraph that seemed to do away with such implications in favor of her just sacrificing people for immortality. To be honest, I don't entirely mind this. Unfortunately, the third bio was effectively just a placeholder for what came later, though. Elise's third and currently canon bio is by far her most detailed, but it's not exactly what I'd call good. Elise was born to House Kythera, a powerful noble family in Noxus. She got herself engaged to Bernhold of House Zavon, using her beauty to beguile him into basically becoming her political puppet more so than her husband. Unfortunately for Elise, Bernhold eventually wised up to her manipulations and turned the tables. One evening, Bernhold poisoned Elise's drink, and would only agree to give her the antidote if she swore submissiveness to him. Elise responded by murdering the man and stealing the antidote off of his person. Though even with the cure, the poison took a serious toll upon her. As she lay sick in bed, Elise was approached by the Pale Woman, aka LeBlanc. As it happened, Bernhold had been a valuable tool of the Black Rose, so his sudden demise was inconvenient. Elise, though, had proven cunning enough to be a potential asset in Bernhold's place. Elise quickly took to the Black Rose, becoming one of the organization's most prominent members. During her time working for them, she learned about the skull of Zon Uzal, aka Mordekaiser, which had been hidden away on the Shadow Isles. This bio was written during a time when Mord's skeleton was a necessary component to resurrect him, though since his current bio did away with that plot point, it now stands up for debate as to whether or not this counts as a plot hole. Regardless, Elise decides to go and get the skull for LeBlanc, eager to curry even more favor with the Black Rose's mistress, despite knowing that the trek was dangerous. Elise ventures to the forsaken capital of Helia in search of the skull, only to encounter the long-forgotten spider god Vilemaw, who is no longer stated to be undead. If anything, this version of the bio seems to imply Vilemaw might predate the Shadow Isles, which leads us back to the issue of this so-called deity's ambiguity. Vilemaw ate Elise's companions, but chose to simply sink its fangs into her shoulder. Things that are approximately about as big as her entire body, mind you. For whatever reason, the venom did not kill Elise, but instead transformed her and gave her spider magic. So, Elise is just straight up Spider-Man, I guess. Or Spider-Woman? Whatever. The point is that she could shoot webs, grow arachnid limbs out of her back, fire off venom from her hands, and even turn into a giant spider if she wants. Also, there's now some kind of psychic link between Elise and Bioma for whatever reason. Also, these spider powers now seem to mean that the undead of the Shadow Isles won't bother her, again, for reasons that are not very clearly explained. Regardless, Elise comes back to Noxus to strike a deal with LeBlanc. In exchange for being given sacrifices for Vioma, Elise would go to the Shadow Isles and gather up any and all ancient artifacts she could from the Black Mist, then turn them over to the Pale Woman. Okay, so, putting aside all the vagary from this bio, the other big issue that arises from this version is that it kind of feels like Elise lacks much agency. Like, she effectively serves two different masters now, the Black Rose in Noxus and the Spider God on the Isles. Elise's entire character now revolves around making offerings to one or the other so that she can continue to reap the benefits. Elise has to continue proving her usefulness to LeBlanc to stay in the Cabal, and she has to give Vioma human sacrifices to keep her supernatural power. It all serves to make Elise seem less like a powerful manipulator, and more so that she's stuck between a rock and a hard place, with seemingly no intention of trying to get out or usurp either of her so-called benefactors. It kind of undermines the confident and always in control aura that Elise is supposed to have, and this admittedly even was an issue that I struggled to contend with in my Rune Tarot Rewrites episode for her. I do maintain, however, that so many fundamental issues could be resolved if we just remove Vioma from the Shadow Isles entirely. Just make the Spider God some ancient spirit or demon worshipped by the Noxai tribes of old, and Elise could be its priestess. Maintain the relationship that she offers the beast sacrifices in order to retain her youth and power. As for the Black Rose, I think Elise's relationship with them would work better as a partnership rather than subservience. I mean, the framework is there. Elise uses her spider powers on behalf of the Black Rose in exchange for fresh meat. Elise just feels so close to being a really solid character. You honestly would not need to change much to resolve the issues in her bio. Unfortunately, the lack of Elise's actual character agency and the vague lore surrounding Vioma and how its powers even work just wind up making Elise feel like kind of a nothing character at the end of the day. A villain who allegedly craves power and control, yet is ultimately subservient to two villains bigger than herself. But what do you all think? Do you believe Elise would work best removed from the Isles, or should Riot have leaned into that connection way harder? Leave your thoughts and comments down below, and until next time, stay bright.